Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto with you on August 16, 2026. The time 4 p.m. PDT. Welcome, one and all. I have an incredible talk for you. At least I anticipate it'll be incredible because I was working up to the very last moment preparing for this live stream, and some of you will see this on repeat. And it's my fondest hope that people will review this material multiple times because it's not deep in the sense it's profound, but it's multifaceted in the way that you can't just go off just one particular stream of thought here. There's a multitude of layers. This is a deeply nuanced subject that I'll be dealing with today. And what is that subject? Yes, if you haven't heard the news yet, the poster boy of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, Professor Arday, who had resigned from the esteemed institution of higher learning, Cambridge University, turned up dead. And I just learned about this yesterday. I posted it to my X account. And those of you who aren't on there yet, I have, I don't know, almost 2,500 subscribers. And I'm fairly new to X, but it's been working out very well for me in getting out fast breaking information. So I did a little bit about the death of Arday on that platform. And I also went straight to my Patreon platform to give a little bit more in-depth information about the Arday resignation, first of all, and then the death. Now, the specifics of his death are unclear at this point. I haven't been able to find it, and truthfully, I haven't really been able to look at any sort of reports, forensic reports, police reports, autopsy, coroner's reports, whatever their system is in place in Cambridge or in Britain. I haven't looked at those official documents. Not that that's going to tell us the full story. However, I have a meta commentary on the event that far exceeds anything that you will encounter amongst the nattering nabobs of negativity on TubeView. All the finger waggers saying, see, DI doesn't work, because it's an Anglo-American operation. It always has been, and it will continue to be so for reasons that I'll explain in this talk here, that no other people have really dealt with. They're incapable of doing it, number one. And secondly, the diversion is part of the story. That is a diversion of focus, analytical focus on the death of Jason Arday. They're focusing, in other words, exclusively on so-called DEI, affirmative action, political correctness. You've heard of critical race theory. They throw it all in there, right? Even people on the left who are coming over. There's this group, a self-appointed group that call themselves the intellectual dark web, who are now pretending that they were always in the fold so far as criticism of these movements, these related movements, post-structuralism, feminism, post-feminism, critical race theory, post-colonialism, post-colonial theory. You have to throw that in there. Anything with post in it, the intellectual dark web are now supposedly against it. And its most visible proponents are the twinsies, Brett Weinstein and Peter Boghossian. And I know Boghossian, he's not Jewish, but most of them are Jews because they were there to gin up. See, this is a boom and bust. It's a pump and dump scheme. They were there to pump up all this material on white studies and whiteness and white supremacy. They were behind, they were, but as soon as the people of color, let's say at Portland State University, in the case of Brett Weinerstein, they started blockading him, and he said, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm a Jew. I'm not white. I'm not," but because he was going off of capital that his people had accrued up until recently. By recently, I mean since the 50s and 60s and 70s, Jews have become the dominant force within academia, both in the UK and in the United States. And just to cut to the chase right now, I think that's really I believe, I'm firmly convinced, no waffle words here, that it is this particular group that has hijacked feminism, the reaction to it, critical race theory against it, right? The intellectual dark web, and are now saying, "Oh, wait a minute, we've gone too far," because they're the ones that have the positions of power at Harvard University, at Columbia, at Yale, at NYU, New York University in particular. It's all Jewish. I'm not just talking about the administration. I'm talking about the professoriate. I know, I'm from that world. Do you know who Patrick Byrne is, on a slightly unrelated matter? He's the person who's been doing the research on election theft. You'll see him quite often on the Alex Jones show, but he has a PhD from Stanford, right? And I'm just invoking him because he said, kind of as a sidebar, having gone through a PhD program at Stanford, which is pretty typical, it's elite, super elite. I mean, Samuel Bankman-Fried, who's now in prison, by the way, because of his financial shenanigans, not one, but both of his parents are professors at Stanford Law. That's just one example. There are many others. But anyway, getting back to Patrick Byrne, he says it's the conversation amongst Jewish intelligentsia is really geared towards anti-Goy type of activity. And so far as yellow, because I'm not a Goy specifically in their mind, for them, that's Anglo-Saxon, that's Christians. And I am a Christian, but I'm not Anglo-Saxon, obviously. And as I've been telling you throughout my 5 years doing this show, the case of Jewish versus yellows, the yellows are kind of like the butts of their joke, of their humor, because they can't pick on blacks anymore. They used to do all these Schwarzer jokes and Negro jokes, and they used to make fun of Mexicans, but they can't do that anymore. So they still do it with the yellow people, right? That's us. And I think the best way to do that is just to exclude them from the image. And I know that because I'm an expert in media studies and in popular culture. Toward that end, if I may just take a moment to indulge myself here for your benefit, really, because I'm trying to call bullshit on the whole hijacking of discourse within the academic world. I've been doing it for decades. I've been doing it almost continuously since I've been in the field for, I don't know, 40 years, something like that. I was at 21 years at the University of California, Davis, which is close to Berkeley. It's near Sacramento. But anyway, yesterday I checked the mail, and you can't see it, I think, but it's in a mailer. I appreciate that. But I got this in the mail, and it's from Bowling Green State University, the Office of Registration and Records, because I ordered this a few weeks ago. I ordered my official transcripts for the master's degree there. It's going to show all the courses I took in popular culture. Okay, I studied it at the graduate level, not like these posers who 30, 40 years after the fact now claiming expertise in the area. Right? Oh, yeah, politics is downstream from the popular culture. Sound familiar? That's Andrew Breitbart. Tell me something. He was not from academia, but he got the point, and he's right about that. But I figured out decades ago, because I was there in 1975, 76, and this is going to validate and verify from the university itself my bona fides, my credentials, my diploma. Well, it's not my diploma. My diploma is en route. I even ordered a duplicate diploma because I don't know where my transcripts are. I don't know where my diplomas are, so I'm reordering now, and I just thought for fun I would show it on camera. In fact, I'm gonna open it live. I'm not gonna do it here right now to take any time. Maybe I'll do it for my Patreons. I'll do a strip tease of my credentials, okay? And the reason I find this necessary is because there's so many posers out there, and I'm planting my flag. I'm putting my credentials on here for you to inspect. I'm going to take a scan of this and I'm going to post it on my Patreon so you could eat your hearts out that this person here, the Yeller Man, has been at it for, well, I got my degree in 76. All right. And from there, I went on to help pioneer what is now called ethnic studies. I helped pioneer what is now called critical race theory, which is now we're seeing a backlash against it. And that backlash has coalesced around the figure of Jason Arday. See that circle, that loop there? So I am perfectly situated to comment, better than most of these jerk offs who are on TubeU, to comment on what's going on here. But will I get any play on this? No, I won't, because I'm a Yeller Man. And also, I'm white adjacent. I'm not getting no love from no black people either because I'm white adjacent. By the way, all black people don't feel that way. There's a guy, John McWhorter, who's good. There's in fact, I'm going to mention a couple who, because we're losing sight that there's a cadre of black intellectuals who are like top tier, high level. You never hear of them. You're going to just hear about Jason Arday, and it ain't right. Okay, you're not going to hear about Manning Marable. All right, he's dead now, but he wrote the definitive, so far as I'm concerned, the definitive biography of Malcolm X. Manning Marable, I met him once. He was a socialist. He was a Democratic Socialist of America. And you can say, oh, socialist, blah, 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 because you listen to Alex Jones and that fat dude, what's his name, who's talking about the Chicoms and the Chinese taking over, whoever, all them, John Bircher. You're listening. So whenever someone mentions socialism, you get all your panties in a bunch. But he was very active in GSA. And I think I still am enrolled as a Green Party, which is very much related to that. So I come from the left, really. But I'm not one of these retread dark, intellectual dark web retreads that are now remaking themselves, right, to fit the fashion, the hemline of 2026. Right. I'm OG, in other words. So anyway, subscribe to my Patreon and you will get the reveal of the transcripts. I'm going to do it live, just like Geraldo Rivera, who, by the way, his real name is Jerry Rivers. He's Jewish too. He's Jewish like Alejandro Cortez. And same with Paulina Luna, they're Jewish. Okay, and why is this important? It's not because I make a hobby out of identifying people who are like conversos or marranos, right? That's not really what I'm just trying to say that if you're going to blame Jason Arday, if you're going to scapegoat, and I'm not a fan of his, by the way, if you're going to select Jason Arday to assume the sins of the academic world and the World Bank and the New World Order, which these are the people behind it, the World Bank specifically. You want an institutional name? I'll give it to you right now. World Bank. You know who the first president of the World Bank was? It was Eugene Meyer. You know who Eugene Meyer was? He founded the newspaper that today is known as the Washington Post. You know about Katharine Graham? She married a Goy family. Graham was the CIA man. She's a Meyer. She's dead now. He's dead. He committed suicide or was pushed into suicide. There's a whole story behind it. That's the Washington Compost. Eugene Meyer, that he was the head of the World Bank. And then Robert S. McNamara, because I got to get my initials right, because some nitpicker is going to say, "Oh, it wasn't F, it was S. McNamara." I looked it up on Wikipedia. I don't have the luxury of looking at Wikipedia after you have gone through my talk, my spontaneous jazz improvisation at your leisure. I don't have that luxury. Okay, I'm just telling you, because nitpickers bug the shit out of me. You bug me in class, you bug me at the seminar room, you bug me at lectures, you bug me at talks, you bug me now because not because you're irritating. It's because you think you're smarter than me. You think you're going to catch the professor in a mistake, right? But you're missing. The thing is that's fine, do that, but you're missing the larger point. You're missing the larger point, the big picture. That's what I'm trying to get across to you, all the people who like to put in your comments, "Well, it's not 2027, it's 2026. Sorry." But you know what? If you take any of John Coltrane's solos, especially during his post-bop period, before he went total avant-garde, before he went off planet and just became pure sound, that John Coltrane, if you listen to, let's say, Giant Steps, everybody knows that one, and you slow it down on your software, your machine, your equipment, which I have like so many different machines that will slow down records and CDs and tapes, and we used to do it manually with everything because I wanted to learn the architectonics of these geniuses. But you know what? I hear a lot of quote unquote mistakes in their work. It doesn't fit theoretical music theory, harmonic theory. By a long shot, it doesn't. All right, I'm not comparing myself to the great John Coltrane by any stretch of the imagination, but that allows me some space to really stretch out, really, because it's the total effect that I'm after here. And the total effect is to bring to you the deeper understanding of what the Jason Arday scandal implies. And it's deep. It goes deep. It goes into the deep state. I'm purposely teasing you here. I want you to hang in there because it's a step-by-step process by which we will come to, hopefully, the correct conclusion. It's the conclusions that I have come to. So using bookkeeper terminology, I'm implying that Professor Jason Arday went from the asset category to the liability category. And what do you do with your liabilities? You get rid of it. You get it off the books. You write it down. Or you sweep it under the cover. If you're the government printing money, you just kick the can down the road and let the next generation worry about bankruptcy. We're talking about the American macro economy, the World Bank, the world economy, really. So I'm positing the hypothesis for you today, and this only came to me today. I had to rework an entire talk that I had conceived and mapped out over this past week, when I was trying to figure out an approach on and of course, I didn't want to repeat what's going out there because it's the material that you're seeing on the Spectator or some conservative think tanks or even leftist ones. I don't think Democracy Now! Has chimed in yet, but I'm expecting they will. Everybody has to cover it now, especially now that he's dead. And I didn't want to cover those same grounds. But it wasn't just because I wanted to be a contrarian. I wanted to draw from my vast storehouse of knowledge in the theory, the method, and the execution of this methodology that I refer to as cultural forensics. Cultural forensics. And one of the wings or streams of cultural forensics is a understanding, maybe not at the expert level. I go to the experts. I am not the expert, but I know where to go to and where to look and who to consult with. But one of the wings, the streams of cultural forensics is an understanding of the intelligence agencies. And most of you think, oh, okay, that rings my bell right now. I can just shut it off right now. I know everything he's going to say because I read Whitney Webb and it's One Nation Under Black. Oh, I read so-and-so, and she told us all about MK Ultra, and she told us all about the CIA or the Freemasons or the Federal Reserve. So I know. See, and I'm mocking this because this is the problem that occurs when all this valuable information, which was once upon a time cutting edge, becomes trivialized to the point of mere entertainment. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing a show about DEI flagellation. So I'm positing the strong possibility that Jason Arday was an intelligence operative, or on a lesser level, was it at minimum an intelligence asset, which means that he was not a witting participant in his own control, his own maneuvers. They were people who were handling him. And for those of you who think you know all about secret societies and intelligence operations, all the MIs and the SIS and the Kempeitai, this is Japan, Imperial Japan, or the Central, or the Office of Naval, you pick your intelligence, right? You're going to say, okay, yeah, I got that. I know that. But you know what? You don't have the specifics. Now, I don't have the time to give you chapter, line, and verse here, but I will give you an overview that will help you understand a lot of what's going on here that has escaped your attention, your critical attention, and the attention of the so-called experts. All right. For those of you who, for some reason, don't know what I'm talking about, so far as Jason Arday is concerned, it behooves us to take a look at one commentator. I don't know who this is, but that doesn't matter. He was up on this. This is the first piece I looked at when I think I woke up today, like this morning, around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I said I couldn't. Something told me to look in X to see what the headlines were. And it says Jason Arday dead. So this is the first guy I checked out. This is not in a matter in any sort of level of importance. He seemed to be pretty on top of it. And from what I hear of him, I think I agree with his politics. But this is the first report I came across this morning about the death of Jason Arday, which is still steeped in mystery. So this is an ongoing saga as it unfolds, right? And it's going to take a lot before the rest of the public catches up to this, because it has to do with university life. It's actually a lot more. The university is the tip of the iceberg. This has to do with life in general, how it works, how it operates, oppression, repression, liberty, enslavement. It covers it all through the figure of a Jason Arday. All right, so let's take a look at how one gentleman has conceived of the situation.
Wow. This is crazy.
Shoot.
And what I'd like to do is...
Sorry, I got the wrong one.
To the addition from the...
I got the wrong one. Here we go.
University's youngest black professor ever.
has been found dead a week after he resigned amid plagiarism allegations. Investigators say the circumstances of the 41-year-old's death do not appear to be suspicious. The BBC's Helena Wilkinson has the very latest.
3 years ago, Jason Arday made history, becoming Cambridge University's youngest ever black professor. But earlier this month, he was at the centre of a plagiarism row. And last week, he quit his role with immediate effect. Tonight, it's been confirmed that Professor Jason Arday has been found dead. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police said they were called by the London Ambulance Service this afternoon following a report that a man had been found unresponsive inside a property. Sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers.
We just talked about this individual just a couple of days ago. It's crazy. He's 41 years old, the same age as I am. He was basically caught fabricating a lot of his life to make it seem more attractive for audiences, for recognition, to get this position as the Cambridge youngest black professor. And the fact that he's passed away, police are saying that it's not suspicious. It looks like he may have self-deleted, just couldn't handle all of the issues, all the press, the fact he got caught with a lot of the plagiarism.
Okay, this individual is implying that it was probably what do you call self-extinction or something. I'll go further. I think he was knocked off. I think he was a national security risk to the point where he could not be allowed to be running out there, because who knows what he's going to be. It's kind of like Epstein. Who's going to be able to control a guy who's already in prison or whose life is already ruined? He's going to talk. He's going to name names. And okay, this is part speculative. He's going to be talking about how he was taken as a teenager from a black community. I'm using the British word black. Black could mean Jamaican, Caribbean. All right, just like if you're from the UK, when you people say Asian, you mean Indians. We call them Indians. We call them South Asians. Those are Pakistanis. But Asians in America are East Asian types like me, or Southeast Asian Vietnamese, right? There's a slight difference in terminology, but it's the same idea. We're supposed to be living under subordination in contemporary society. And there's some historical legitimacy to that. I'm not dismissing it. This is not the time nor the place to rehearse those arguments. They've been talked about for the last 30, 40 years to no great conclusions, right? And I know most of the people who were involved in that whole discussion. I know the figures who pioneered the arguments. They were my colleagues. I've been in their offices. I've seen them at conferences. I read their papers. I've critiqued their papers. They've reviewed my work. All right. That's what I was going to talk about before I found out that Arday turned up dead. I was going to talk about how I was part of this larger movement that people in 2026 still can't let go of. And you know where we need to what to let go of and where to can't latch on to. We need to latch on to some of us cultural forensics. We got to love us some cultural forensics, as I've been arguing for 5 years now. Because your Marxists, your DEI, your feminists, these are primarily Jewish intellectuals, right? So they're not coming from a Christian background. If anything, it's mockery and dismissal and condescension, right? I mentioned Patrick Byrne. He probably grew up, Irish American Catholic, I'm assuming, right? But so he's probably sensitive to that. But I'm sensitive to it as well, because I grew up amongst these are the people that are critiquing my work, and these are the people that are telling, well, what's your problem? At least you're not Jewish. At least you didn't go through the Holocaust. At least you didn't struggle under the pogrom. I mean, because they were mostly based in New York. They were from New York City. They were from the City College of New York, just like the publishing business, just like Wall Street. Later, they migrated to Hollywood. It's all the same club, and I don't belong to it, even though I said I was going to change my name to Shlomo Hamamoto. Sorry, no ticky, no washi. You get to be Hop Sing, being buggered by 5 Jewish ranchers on Bonanza. Huh, yeah, Hop Sing, give it to me. Huh, huh. Yeah, Hoss, come on, little Joe, ride that little Hop Sing. All right, that's that's my little parody of Bonanza, which was my dad's favorite show. He loved them westerns, and I grew up loving them too, because I'm a creature of television. Remember, I have a master's degree in popular culture, which people told me, including most of these Jewish intellectuals, were telling me, this is worthless. You got to study Marx. And then what did they do? They took culture. They took a lot of the material that we were developing in Bowling Green, Ohio, and they turned it into cultural studies. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from the New York intellectuals. It doesn't come from the University of Birmingham, Stewart Hall. That's where they developed it. It comes from Bowling Green, Ohio. It's in northern Ohio, near Lake Erie, south of Toledo. It's a state university. It's not a prestige place, right? Which is fine with me. I was just going because, wow, I'll come across and get to talk to some like-minded people who are into television westerns, and we were into science fiction, and we like movies of a certain vintage, a certain era, film noir, that type of stuff, and really delve and not feel guilty about it. Because when you're in my day, when you were in college and you were interested in popular culture, you were not interested in the canon, CANON. That is the canonical works of the great books of Western civilization. This is the University of Chicago term, right? If you weren't, then you weren't a serious intellectual, right? So I grew up under the tail end of that regime. I was part of that cohort that threw that over to the point where popular culture studies became cool, and even race and ethnicity studies became cool, right? But again, as I've told you before, I've seen it circle around and become regressive in itself, being an oppressive center of control within not just the university, but within the entire administrative state. The same people who I saw and I read who were developing critical race theories were being called over to Washington, D.C. to consult with high-level federal agencies to talk about it was called affirmative action. Affirmative action, today it's called DEI. And they were getting pretty good consulting fees in addition to building their reputations in the academic world, right? I went to go see, I'm not just dropping names here. These are just people, just so you know that I'm not talking out of my ass, but I went to go see one of the key figures, and I mention his name because he deserves more credit for his contribution to critical race theory. His name's Michael Omi. OMI. He's also a yellow man of my generation. So we understand our respect in our worlds, because it's probably very similar, right? Being yellow men and trying to survive in predominantly Jewish academia at this point. And I say Jewish academia because prior to the 50s and 60s, it was Goy academia. It was the white shoe boys that ran Yale and Harvard. So their ascendancy can be traced historically through specific figures, works, the literature, and superstars that developed in all these different fields. That's why I'm mentioning the ethnic and racial component to this discussion. And Jason Arday comes in on the tail end of that whole decades-long process, which tells me it's coming to an end. And in his case, I'm sorry, I don't want to make light of his death, but in his case, it came to a literal end. the end of his life. So the real question is, what's going to replace DEI now that even the leftist progressive people, such as those like Brett Weinstein and Peter Boghossian and the people who call themselves the intellectual dark web. It sounds so avant-garde. It sounds so cutting edge. Oh yeah, it sounds so deep. It sounds so scholarly. Sounds like something that would reverberate on the campus of Yale University or some other Gothic center of learning. Medieval, right? It's a priesthood, of course, or a rabbinate, if you prefer, whatever it is. It's a very elite circle of people. And Jason, the big news is, of course, was Jason Arday was able to break into it. And then most of these people who are commenting on his rise and his fall and now his demise only get to that point. Say, oh, we shouldn't have that anyway. Oh, it's just unfair. And the Jews and Asians and Indians are being barred from admission to Harvard because they outperform Black people and Latinos, which is true, by the way. There's severe discrimination against, I'll just talk about my own people, against yellow people. All right, and I have mixed feelings about that too, because most of the yellow people who want to get into Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Brown, all the Ivies, right, or across the ocean, Cambridge, Oxford, these are people who want to become part of the establishment. They want it. They think getting the degree is the first step to becoming a good old boy. So that's their motivation. That was never my motivation. My motivation was ripped down to that whole structure, to tear it down. Right. So whereas I will advocate for their equal, I'm talking about yellows now, equal treatment to be admitted into Harvard, I'm not 100% behind it, because they're trying to get jobs that'll make them powerful within the New World Order system. Okay, I was an invited speaker, a guest speaker at the Asian American Law Students of Harvard University, Harvard Law. Okay, it doesn't get much better than that. Little old Professor Hamamoto, who gained notoriety by being the person who theorized and executed the first ever all yellow porno. It's in this book here. I don't have it with me. I laid it out. That was a provocation, by the way. That was intentional. I knew what I was doing all the time. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why people don't want to talk to me, because they know that I know what they're about, what they're doing, and they know that I'm already parodying it. I'm jesting here, right? Because I know I'm not going to be able to get into the same room to debate them. They're not going to allow me at the same conferences and share the dais with Andrew Ross, with Stanley Uranowitz, with Trisha Rose. These are three people from NYU that are on my mind, because I know them all. I don't know Trisha Ross. All I know is that she was fucking Andrew Ross. Andrew Ross was fucking Trisha Rose at one point. So that helped him get, become an academic superstar. Yes, there's a lot of gossip in academia. I'm just giving you a little bit of titillating bits here. But Stanley Uranowitz, I knew well. He was my dissertation advisor. He was on the faculty of comparative. I helped him get the job there in comparative college. He's a big shot. But as soon as he could, he got the hell out of there and went back to where he belongs, New York City. He went to City College of New York Graduate Center, right? He's worth a talk. I'm talking about Stanley Uranowitz. I was going to talk about him today and my relationship to him, but I'll go so far as to say he had an influence on me to a certain degree, but I had a bigger influence on him than the other way around. It's because of his encounter with me and my background. See, I came into the comparative culture program at UC Irvine where he was with this master's degree in popular culture, and I wrote papers. I wrote really damn good papers. I wrote it on jazz. I read it on movies, and he was open to that. But he was reading this stuff, and he goes, "Wow, that's great. I'm going to get the hell out of here. Get a job at NYU or City College of University. I go back to New York. New York is my roots." He comes from, Eastern European, Polish, Jewish, working class background. He came up through the whole union movement, and he kind of reinvented himself into an all-purpose Jewish intellectual of a certain historical level. That's Stanley around. That was my mentor. He didn't help me do anything, and if nothing, he was plundering my work. So I'm very sensitive when someone like Carol Swain writes a book about another Black imposter. Her name's Gay, I think it was Claudine. She wound up to be the president of Harvard University, and she's a plagiarist. She had to resign. I've given a talk about this already, so I'm going to go through it. This is a good book, by the way. I mean, you don't even have to know anything about history, historiography, or political science, or election. You don't have to care, but you will find a lot of juicy, goosey tidbits about academic politics, because I told you academia is Hollywood for ugly people. There's a whole caste system, CASTE, and there's a casting couch system as well. Man, I was going to spend more time today showing you excerpts of all the women who were screwing so and so and so, screwing their way to the top. I have their number on all of it. I got all the story. That is one of the biggest benefits of being an insider in the academic world, is because I got all the smut. I got all the gossip. All right. And most people who are outside that world don't think there's anything gossipy in our world, but the whole institution runs on gossip. It runs on extortion. It runs on blackmail. It runs on lesbianism. It runs on gaydom. It runs on dirty old men going into the shower room and playing with the Penn State football players' ding-a-lings. All the way down. Anything you want to see in the larger society, you will find it in macrocosm at Penn State or UC, wherever you go. It's there. And in fact, they workshop it, they refine it, and they write a paper about it and get it published in journals so that everybody will live in a queer, genderless society culture. Where do you think this stuff comes from? Do people just pull it out of their butt? No, they do it at the college town USA. So you're getting the advanced seminar right here and now. You've been getting it for the last 5 years. So if you haven't already, get off your ass and subscribe to this channel, right? Instead of listening to Joe Rogan or Jimmy Dore or Bill Maher, that wanker, this retooled comedian, or that rehabilitated Wall Street guy with Julian Dore. Is it Julian Dore? There's a new one, all that, and then they got the tattooed wonders. They're all ex-special forces. Right, and all the ex-DAs and all the ex-PIs, private investigators, all the ex-attorneys, XXX. You even got X-rated actors on tube. Now you got a broken down figure like me, a yeller man. And I pioneered the genre. I'm using this opportunity, by the way, over the last 5 years. Took me a while to figure it out, but it's really my testament because no one cares. No one's going to sit down and record my story. No one's going to get the names, like who was screwing who to get where and how it functions, and the backstory of how this person became the occupant of a certain endowed chair. Right. That's when a super wealthy person puts a lot of money in a chair, puts their name on it, and they put one of their pets in there. And there's prestige. That's the ultimate mark of prestige if you have an endowed chair in the academic world. The only endowed chair I have is called Portasan. It's a porta potty. It's got a hole in it. You sit it down like you're camping out there. You got to, do your business. Well, that's my chair. That's my academic chair. Okay, here's one individual who's very broken up about Jason Arday. At least he's pretending to be. And he's a fellow black man telling about how Jason Arday was lynched, just like Clarence Thomas, in front of the whole congressional hearings for his nomination to Supreme Court Justice. He says, this is an electronic lynching. And man, everybody froze up, man. Clarence Thomas walked right in there, man. And this guy was a porno freak. I mean, he was harassing ladies left and right. Anita Hill, Professor Anita Hill, she was no hoe. She was like a professor of law. Right? She testified, but as soon as he said, this is an electronic lynch, he said it on 3 network oligopoly live television. And everybody just laid off back then because, man, that's some powerful words. So listen to this guy here.
Yesterday, like when you talk about those amount of articles and you just blame Cambridge University, this is the media. This is 188 articles.
A lynching?
What else could you call it?
So I want to come back to this story. It's been 24 hours since news of Jason Arday, Cambridge, youngest black professor that took his own life. And it looks like the media is trying to shift this blame, the scrutiny of the many articles and videos, basically scrutinizing, criticizing Jason Arday plagiarism, some of the tales that he has said that turned out not to make sense, to be impossible, or just not be true. Many people believe that it's the scrutiny that caused Jason Arday to take his own life. So this video is from Channel 4 News. You can look at the like to dislike ratio. People are not really feeling it. I saw the other BBC videos as well that shows that it seems like the mainstream media is taking that narrative and running with it. So let's watch this and react to it.
British academia could be. Now his death is a reckoning over duty of care, institutional failure, media. Jason Arday was once held up as a symbol of what British academia could be.
Okay, hold that thought in your mind. What British academia can be. Now, why does British academia want to be represented in such a fashion? There are deep political, economic motivations for the necessity of putting black faces up there and brown face, diverse faces up there at elite institutions, if they want to continue to exercise global domination, political, economic, military, cultural domination, and if they want to reproduce it and extend it, they have to have the face. Now, that's not the extent of my critique here. That's pretty obvious. That's pretty simple, right? But just hang with that one for a little bit because it's going to go deeper than that. And it has to go to the history of more recent, when I say recent, British espionage goes at least back to the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, right? With the original 007, John Dee, Dr. John Dee. You know that story already, right? So that stuff's useful. All the stuff that you've been hearing and retread and rehashed over the years and years and years of the repetitious tubu experts, the pop-up, it's not going to go all the way. Some go to waste. A lot of it you'll still be able to use. But with the cultural forensics, you're going to be able to take that information, build on it, and go much, much farther than any of your critical race theory people, much farther than any of your so-called academic feminists, your post-feminists, your third-wave feminists, or whatever they're coming out with, their Deleuze and Guattari, rhizomatic, post-structuralist, Foucauldian deconstruction. This is much more valuable than any of that. I promise you. if you put the work into it, and you've done most of the work already, you just haven't been able to frame it within a certain paradigm or model, explanatory model, as we call it. I, for the sake of convenience, call it cultural forensics, right? Because you can study anything with it, from comic books to pornography to sports to gender relationships to even biology and science, history of science, all of it. That's a grand claim. It's a synthesizing claim. That doesn't mean you're going to be expert in this, but you're going to be able to understand how these different areas of knowledge are being used not to liberate us, but for the most part to further enslave and control us. And one of the main peoples that are being used and positioned to do the enslaving on the administrative level are yellow people, with some symbolic characters like your Jason Arday as well. All right. So here's another preachy person. And she's one of, I put her in here because she represents the bane of my existence. And this is the psychotherapy pseudo profession. It's also a Jewish profession. Okay, that's not me saying that. These are Jewish historians of psychology, psychotherapy, the history of science. They talk about Jewish preeminence within psychiatry, psychology, the behavioral sciences. I mean, when you've turned your face away from the God of Abraham and you deny your own God, there's a huge vacuum that's created. That's where psychology, psychiatry, and the madness studies, that's where that comes in. It would just be much simpler if they returned to the faith of their fathers and subscribed to it and adhered to it, and read the Hebrew Bible and read the Christian Bible as well, all the books of wisdom, instead of reading new Luciferian infused Sabbatean Frankist inflected literature and call it social science, call it anthropology, call it sociology, call it critical race theory, because that's where that comes from at bottom. All right. See, this is why I'm not invited to any of their meetings, because can you imagine someone like that going to Reinventing Marxism conference? There was such a series. I think it was at University of Massachusetts Amherst. These are all new Marxists. These are like second, third, fourth generation Marxists. They're still around. In fact, they're now in critical race theory, and they're the ones who are doing feminism, because Marxism is about using a certain group of people to destroy Christian civilization. That's the theory of the working class, the proletariat. That's Marx, who comes from a long line of rabbis, by the way, on both sides of the family, with Mordecai, right? So they're always in search of a proletarian. The proletarians in America got pretty good wages as union members. They became what's called the blue-collar aristocracy. They had steady gigs in Detroit during the glory years, at the tire factory in Los Angeles. Yes, there was tire factories in LA. I remember them. And auto factories in LA, not just automobiles. And then they, moved to profession. So that proletariat didn't materialize. Then they said, okay, we're going to do Negro rights. So we're going to send one of our guys and hook him up with Martin Luther King Jr. down at Atlanta, GA. He was a commie. They got rid of him because he was a liability. Right. But then the black people said, mostly the nationalists, like your Malcolm X, says, no, we're not. We're going to speak for ourselves. We are a black organization. That's Louis Farrakhan and his predecessor. We are a black organization. We're self-help. We don't need outsiders, whether they're Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, doesn't matter. Missionaries, no matter. We are people of African descent. We're going to help ourselves. Marcus Garvey, the Negro self-improvement society, right? You name it. There's all these social movements. They're well documented. So that same cohort said, well, who's going to be the next proletariat? Okay, gays. Said, well, you know what? We need a crisis in order to, because the black people got slavery. You've got the Mexicans who have the farm exploitation. We got Cesar Chavez, and my mentor Stanley Aronowitz knew all the Jewish organizers, by the way, who were behind Cesar Chavez. And it turns out Cesar Chavez was a sexual exploitator. He even impregnated Dolores Huerta multiple times. She's like the mamacita, el jefa. She's like iconic. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disparage her because I admire her incredibly well, and she's still alive too. She'll come after me. She must be pushing 100 years. I've heard her speak. She's dynamic. I never saw Chavez. I was too young for that, and he died eventually. So it's going to be gays, and then the gays said, "No, we can get married now." And David Geffen, I've got all of the black guys I need to spoil and coddle and share my wealth with, and so we're good. We're good. So then they said, okay, we're going to go into the Greens. We'll go to the economy. There's always a search of the new proletariat. And my prediction is the next thing that the unions will do, these are all mob organizations, by the way. These are like Meyer Lansky, going back to the Lansky day. These are going like back to the old, the Paisan, these Siciliani of the early, mafia Jewish labor rackets, right? But I think the next step is they're going to try to organize robots. Yeah, union now. Norma Ray. Yeah, Los Unidos. You know the whole story, right? You can, I think, hopefully see my skepticism that I'm bringing to the effort, because it's going nowhere, especially when you, like myself, know the history of it and seen it and participate in it. And every time I wound up disappointed and disillusioned. Well, gee, gosh, we thought Trump was going to be it. Whiplash, always. Right? No, come on. Let's wise up. We're smarter than that. Besides, we can do it. Yes, we can. Si se puede. I agree with that slogan, but we don't need no Cesar Chavez or even Dolores Huerta or all the Jewish labor racketeers who were behind the United Farm Workers then and now. And in recent memory, they were down in Chinatown, Philippine Little Manila. They were trying to organize the immigrant and refugee seamstress people, the needle trades, they're called. It's the same cast of character. They were like making six figures easy as union heads, union stewards on the backs of women who thought, and college freshmen, because they'd like to come to my classes and recruit out of it and promote their cause. I never let them in my classroom. After the first year, I just said, no, I'm not going to, because I didn't promote it. And I couldn't trust my students to figure out that these guys are just full of shit. Right? They were just promoting themselves. Whatever union that they pretended, it could be SEIU, the service workers, whatever it is. It's a racket, right? And that's not to say that workers should be allowed to be exploited. Not at all. Just the opposite. But you're just heaping a middleman exploitator on the behalf of capital, who are in charge anyway. It's called a sweetheart deal. You understand? They're working all together. Just trying to break it down. By the way, when I used to lecture like this in class, there's any number of those types of students who are already have been cherry picked by these organizers. They call themselves organizers. Most of them were Filipino illegal aliens. That's why I say organizers. In fact, the director, her name was Robin Rodriguez. She was a Filipina. she became the director, the chairman of my program. The first thing because she wanted to set the agenda, she started bringing in all these speakers and this whole process of bringing in Filipino illegal aliens and normalizing them. And they were doing the same thing down on the second floor of my building in so-called Chicanics, Latinx studies. They were promoting illegal immigration. And the word got out pretty quickly that I was against it and that I felt that this was a perversion of these movements, right? La Raza was a good movement at first. Asian American Studies, good movement. They were Native American, good. They'd all been captured and perverted. And the ones who were now in place were with the new regime. And I'm mentioning this backstory because that's exactly what Jason Arday was being positioned to function as, a intermediary. Not just a symbol, but someone who negotiates these tensions within not just Cambridge University, but the larger society and within the global economic system, North and South, right? The global North, the developed countries, and the global South, the underdeveloped societies. And in the underdeveloped societies, so-called of the global South, they, meaning the Cambridge Dons and the Oxford Dons and those at Yale, Princeton, all the elite Anglo-American institutions of higher learning, cherry-picked all the bright young men and then they women to come to school at Cambridge or at Princeton or at the London School of Economics and then groom them through a years-long process of transforming them into a recognizable but controllable, it's called a comprador class. It's kind of a long word for a simple concept. It's called comprador. Just like when Cristoforo Colombo first went to the West Indies, he found out who the big man was, and he gave him all the trinkets, gave him all the women and the wine, whatever it is, and then he treats a certain group within the tribe special, and then they get all the perks coming from Spain, España, or Portugal, and then they become beholden to the Portuguese Empire, and they start ripping off their own people. That's the comprador class. I think that the root word is Portuguese because they pioneered it. They went to places like Macau, they went to Asia. They tried to go into Japan and created a comprador class, right? The cutting edge of the comprador class were religious orders. First Franciscans, around the same time, Franciscans, and of course the notorious Jesuits, as Leo Zagami likes to call them, the Jesuits. I just refer to them as Jesuits so people know what I'm talking about. People like Ignacio Loyola, who was himself Jewish, by the way. He comes from a merchant family. Say, hey, we're going to use this Catholicism thing, and we're going to be able to really create an interesting empire here. And it's working. The bad news is working. The good news is that we're breaking it down here. So Ignatius Loyola, his people, his agents tried to break into Japan. This is where we're getting into my history. Because, you think I'm a yellow man, I'm outside this history. Not at all. I'm at the center of it. And this is what the Jewish intelligentsia of New York City, your Stanley Aronowitz, your Andrew Ross, your Harry Eckstein, your Marilyn Young, they're all in NYU. I met them all. Very, very condescending and towards Asia. And Harry Eckstein was supposedly Japanese studies. And I was telling him about my first-person experiences living overseas as a Fulbright scholar in Japan. So I think he got kind of competitive because he's like Mr. Japanese studies. I didn't know what his language ability was, but he was a kingpin in cultural studies. He was at NYU. and he's such a prick. This is part of the rabbinical training, so I don't take it personally. If you are in academia, if you're on Wall Street, if you're in the legal profession, just look at Alan Dershowitz. Watch Alan Dershowitz talking to Sean Atwood. That's what you're dealing with. That's part of their culture. Okay, it's like we're gonna throw down. Right, we are just going to go at it hammer and tongs. So I don't take it's like put down city. It's condescension. It's dripping with just disdain and disgust. I remember I was whenever Stan Aronowitz, this is at UC Irvine, he'd bring in his friends or there'd be guest speakers. In grad school, there's lots of guest speakers coming. You get to meet a lot of people from all the different universities. It's a really good thing about it. You get to hang out with them. You know, it's like being part of a Woodstock or something. You get to hang out backstage and they're playing. They perform a little bit, go out to dinner, drink, talk, and of course, very importantly, share gossip. And then there's hookups and whatever else. But one thing that I'll share with you about Stanley Aronowitz is that whenever he was debating these people or arguing with them, he wouldn't say anything, but his face would look like he was having an epileptic fit. He would just have these contortions in the face, and he was just so disgusted at what they were saying. He didn't have to say a word. And I said, he definitely went to shul as a kid. You know, he went to Hebrew school when he was preparing for his bar mitzvah. Because that's the type of process, intellectual process. You know, Marx through Hegel later on called it dialectical materialism. It's like that. If you've read the work, that scholarship, that was my job after all, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you read some of the more theoretical, less essayistic work of Freud, it's very much like a rabbinical training. Right. And people who have studied for the rabbinate or Orthodox Jews or secular Jews will agree. They've written books on it. That's where I'm getting my information. I'm telling you right now. They know this. That's from the tradition. Okay, so I didn't take it personally. What I did do, though, is learn their style of Kung Fu or Aikido. And you think I'm joking? Boy, there is an art in verbal aggression, verbal self-defense, verbal attack, and psychological warfare. And if you're not ready, willing, and able to deliver on the spot, on the hot seat, at that level, with all these mensch, or there could be women, Marilyn Young. I was thinking about it the other day. She was once the head of the American Historical Association. You know, she told me when I gave a talk at NYU, she told me that, my work was shit. That's how and so I said, wow, most women will not talk to you like that and so open. So I said, God, I wonder if she's Jewish. And so I look up her biography. Yeah, her name is, she has a goy name, but her name's, Schlitz. I don't know what. I said, oh, okay, that explains it. Because, by the way, all the women who founded lesbianism, transgenderism, and third wave feminism, they're all Jews. They all have Anglo names, but they're all Jews. And they all have endowed chairs. See how the system works? Put money in there, put your own people in there, change their names. And that's why I keep talking about identity. It's very important. I can't escape and don't want to shed my identity. So I learned their style of verbal aggression and self-defense. I learned their terminology. I literally study it. Right? Leo Roston's Joy of Yiddish is just the tip of the iceberg. This is something that I refer you to, the Dictionary of Yiddish Terms. No, I studied the sitcoms. I wrote a book on the sitcoms. I studied humor. I studied the history of the Borscht Belt. I want to learn everything I can what Grossinger's was all about in the Catskills, where all the comedians of my generation were earning their spurs. They were building their audience, their grit, and then later they went on to Ed Sullivan. Later they went on to Merv Griffin. Later they got their sitcoms. Later they got their movie deals. Later they owned the agencies. You're Michael Lopez. Later they already own the studios. So you see how institutionally I have the knowledge of it, and I'm in the institution. So this cultural forensic is a very valuable survival tool. I would not be speaking to you here today unless I knew this jujitsu, this aikido. And I keep mentioning those Japanese forms of self-defense, martial and intellectual and psychological arts, because guess what? I study them religiously too. And this is something that my Marxist professors, we had a Cuban guy, his name was Raul Fernandez. He was a ripoff artist, by the way. And then Gil Gonzalez, his wife, he's Chicano. His wife wrote his doctoral dissertation. See, I'm telling you all the insane. This is a comparative culture. You see her, his wife, Rosalinda. She's a piece of work. She wrote his doctoral dissertation out of UCLA. That's very common, by the way. Yeah, some of them buy their dissertations and get into academia that way, or they have an inside track. And I know all the people who came in through the back door, and they're plentiful. And it's not just at the UC or the Cal States. If anything, the elite schools have more examples of those type of people who came in through the back door than not, because there's no oversight. Who can't, hey, if Yale does it, it's got to be good. Harvard decided, oh yeah, Claudine Gay is the shit. We're going to make her the president of Harvard University, and no one's going to be the wiser. Or Stanford University could hire this plagiarist by the name of Mach, or probably Marcel Tessier-Lavigne. He's a Canadian, French Canadian. And I gave a talk already about the kid. He was a freshman at Stanford. He was on the school newspaper. His parents were, by the way, our professional journalists. I think they worked for the Post, Washington Post. And he went to Stanford. He's the guy that did a series of articles on the president of Stanford University that took him down. He was a plagiarist. He was also a neuroscientist. How cool is that? Because Jason Arday is supposedly neurodivergent. That's why they got to give him a job, because he's neurodivergent. In the old days, we used to call them retards. Not me, but I mean, that was the term. That was the popular parlance. But the Luciferian switcheroo is that you make something that's abnormal. I'll use that term. And then you make it normal, and you make it desirable, not just normal. You make it desirable. Because we're creating a generation of neurodivergent young people anyway, even if they're Cambridge or Stanford, whatever it may be, they are definitely neurodivergent. I mean, the amount of jabs they've taken, they grew up wearing a mask and starving their brains for hours at a time, doing nothing but looking at their dumb phones. That's gonna make really screw you up, right? And that's why you have these ladies like here who are supposedly psychotherapists who will break it down for you about Jason Arday. Here we go.
Part of London, and very kindly has joined us again on at short notice on the very sad death of Professor Jason Arday, who has been found dead, found unresponsive at an address in South London, Battersea, this afternoon. Lucy, a profound shock to so many people, not least his wife and 2 children. We're also in a situation where he has been the subject of so much media scrutiny over the past number of weeks. I would argue that most of that scrutiny is entirely warranted, given the nature of the story. What is your reaction to what has happened today?
It's an incredibly sad ending to this particular story, which had attracted so much media attention. And the media attention was valid in as much as it was curious about what happened within a university and why they had chosen to elevate someone. But what often seemed to be missing was that this was a real human being, and clearly a human being who had perhaps issues throughout his life and who had found a way of coping with quite a lot of life by telling himself stories and creating narratives about himself, which had perhaps never been challenged. And I think it was very interesting that your previous guest, who has been through their own experience of some kind of emotional distress and emotional trauma, it's very hard for other people to recognize what a strain that places on someone. And if you are going through such intense media scrutiny, you are the object of that scrutiny, suddenly all of the stories that you've told yourself about yourself, the narrative that you have constructed, then gets blown apart, it gets picked apart, it gets analyzed in the press. Where does that leave you? The structure you've created for yourself disintegrates, and you don't have anything to hold on to. And I can imagine that as best I can to put myself in the position of someone like Jason Arday, he must have felt incredibly lost and incredibly overwhelmed without the normal ways of coping that he'd had, which was to create these narratives about himself, for himself, to give himself.
Okay, that's enough of that psychologistic mishmash, right? Very predictable. And by the way, a large part of the Jason Arday's story is going to be spun into a mental health teaching moment. Mental health teaching moment. Remember that phrase. I'm a phrase monger. You know, monger's a maker. I'm a phrase maker. I missed my calling. I should have gone in advertising like Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays. Propaganda. It's because I'm a phrase monger. I can recognize it. You can too. If you're attuned to it, if you have the right attitude. But the thing is that you're not giving a moment's peace to develop the proper attitude on how to deal with these situations. So you're going to fall back on the psychology, the therapists, or the retired lawyer, the ex-prosecutor, the ex-ex, or Megyn Kelly. She likes to talk about how she worked for 10 years as an attorney, right? And then she worked for the networks and then Fox and whatever capacity that she was told to occupy. That's what she did. That's what she's doing now. Now, supposedly, she's the voice of conservative womanhood because she drops the F-bomb every once in a while. Big deal. All right. You're same with your Candace Owens, and I'm sure some of you will watch at least part of the fake debate between Candy-O. Remember the car song, Candy-O, I love you. So it's very mesmerizing. By the way, I'm reading the book by his ex-wife who abandoned him, according to Rick Ocasek. Paulina Portosikova, I believe, Czechoslovakian. I'm reading not much in there, so I don't know if I'm going to bother to review it, but that's the type of prep work I do just sort of in general. Right. So let's move then to the money shot, so to speak. What's really at stake here? Well, I don't mean to make light of it or trivialize the death of Jason Arday, but early on in my career, there was something called the Sokal hoax, Sokal. This book was published in 2000. It's old already. I'm familiar with most of these articles when they came out. back when this hoax was revealed. And again, I've been talking about NYU a lot, right? I've mentioned Andrew Ross, Stanley Aronowitz more than once. Stanley Aronowitz was my dissertation advisor. I took all the seminars by the grad PhD seminars. Stanley Aronowitz, brilliant man. I don't mean to gainsay his intellectual skills. He's brilliant, incredible intellectual, and he would give these talks off the top of his head, not a single note. He was a spieler. He could rap. He's a spellbinder. And man, I was eating it up. Right? You're in the programming mode. You're receiving the programs. So he was in NYU. Anyway, he was on the editorial staff of he was one of the co-founders, I think, of a journal, an academic journal called Social Text. And the co-founder was a guy named Andrew Ross. And both those guys. Okay, remember, I'm the OG in popular culture studies. I'm the one that did the graduate work in it. I'm also the OG in race studies and all the other cool stuff, right? And I'm also the OG of cultural forensics. I'm its foremost practitioner because I'm the only one who's practicing it. If you want to start a social movement or an intellectual movement, do it yourself. That's, what I'm doing. So you got your Andrew Ross, and I was also mentioning Trisha Rose. I don't think she might have contributed, but she was a Black intellectual. She got a lot of play at first because she's really good looking. She looked like a model, So they were, screwing or whatever, and so that boosted up both of their stock. Stan, he was a big fat dude. He looked like Leslie West. Remember the guitarist with Mountain? Mississippi Queen, if you know what I mean. That guy, Leslie West, who, by the way, was Jewish himself. But Stanley Aronowitz looked like Leslie West, even the big fuzzy Jewish afro. But Leslie West lost a lot of weight. By the way, I like Leslie West. He has a great vibrato. It's his left hand. Played the Les Paul Jr. through Marshall amplifier. Yeah, Leslie West. I forgot his birth name, but anyway, he looked. This is Stan, and then I looked at him recently. I found a video of Stanley. I was going to show it today but I changed the direction of the talk, and he lost a lot of weight too, because he was huge. He used to be huge. He was so big, Stanley Aronowitz. So here's the smut. Here's the gossip stuff. And we used to snicker whenever me and the seminar people, there's like, 10, 12, 14 people in the seminar room, crowded in a little lecture. It's not even a lecture hall. It's like a seminar room. It's a German style. That's the German seminar system. But whenever you turn around to use the chalkboard, he was so fat that you could see his butt cleavage in his pants. He always wore probably the same pair of Levi's because he's a working man. And you'd always see the big V of his butt cleavage spilling out in the back because his shirt wouldn't come down all the way because he was so big. And once I think he brought in a Carl's Jr. combination lunch. He was always running late, perpetually on the go because he's in demand intellectual. He came in one day and he just consumed this jumbo jack meal, within 10 minutes, giving a lecture on the philosophy of mind, GWF Hegel and how it relates to Marxism. And so you could imagine, I'm just going, wow. That's exactly how I was feeling when I was listening to Jimi Hendrix playing with a band of gypsies at the Forum, Buddy Miles, and Noel Redding. Well, that's the same feeling I got when I was at Shelley's Manhole, or maybe it was the Lighthouse Jazz Club in the South Bay of Los Angeles, and I went to hear McCoy Tyner. And I got to sit right in the front row, right at his right hand. you see God when you're in those types of peak moments. You're transported. Anyway, that's the type of effect that Stanley Aronowitz had. He was charismatic. Okay, if Zabatai Zev was around, that's probably how he would comport himself in a lecture of his followers, right? And he'd say, okay, now you take that wife and you take this wife and you take his wife, and Shem, you go with Jezebel, and I'll go ahead, take your clothes off and screw each other. And they go, yes, Rabbi Zev, Shabbatai. Right? You know the whole story, Shabbatai, the Sabbateans. He had that kind of charismatic hold. And the reason I'm telling you the story is that because I was in that world where we had people like that, the superstars. That's the type of vibe that you were dealing with. Do you understand? So even though Stanley was grossly overweight, he lost weight later on, and he, he looked like a little cute chubby boy with butt cleavage. There are always women, grad students hanging off his balls. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm going down memory lane here. I just like doing this, for you on YouTube. When I start going off on little tangents, please indulge me, because they're meant to be instructive. All right, I'm just trying to convey to you the psychology, the interpersonal dynamics, the room, reading the room, the vibration, right? Ageru. In Japanese, it's ageru. You go in a room and all of a sudden the energy lifts, it goes up. You've all been there. You've all done that. So this is what I'm saying would happen. So you can imagine the weekly seminars were so charged with a combination of burning ambition, eroticism, and frustration all at once. Are you getting the picture? By the way, if anybody from Netflix wants to do a series on this, I want to write that Netflix series. This will be much better than the garbage, that slop that you're running down here. The White Noise, that book. And also, because he had an academic, Don DeLille, I guess he must have taught a little bit. It's an academic novel set in academia. And then there was a movie. My material will just wipe it all out. And I'm going to tell you the smut. And I'm going to put in all the stories of people who are recognizable, right? To avoid lawsuits, we'll kind of change the names to protect the suable. But they're gonna be in there though. Okay, that's my sales pitch, because I'm giving it away for free. And there's writers who watch my show. They're writers. They're journalists. They're a screenwriter. They're getting all kinds of material from me. I know they are. Many of them are on Patreon. That's cool. That's fine. I want to see what you do with this stuff, right? But the real juicy material is with me. And the real story is in the telling of it, right? It's not just hitting the notes. It's the way you deliver the notes, the inflections, and the imperfections, perhaps. Okay, anyway, that's enough of meta criticism. Let's get down to brass tacks here as we wind up. This type of fraud, the Sokol hoax, which Aronowitz was hoaxed, Andrew Ross was hoaxed, all the social text guys at NYU. These are the guys supposedly who helped pioneer quote unquote cultural studies, which is the bane of everybody who considers themselves conservative or right wing, and say, oh, cultural studies, Gramsci, meh. You don't know anything about it. Okay? These are the guys who did it. But even within the leftist circles, a guy named Alan Sokol, who also was from NYU. He was in the physics department, right? He was no intellectual slouch himself. At NYU, wrote a paper, and it got accepted to social text, but it was a complete gobbledygook mishmash deconstructionist expose of so-called critical theory cultural studies. And it created a whole furor, a whole discussion, just like Jason Arday is now, about academic research and writing, the relevance. So this was what, almost 30 years ago now? Yeah, something like that. My arithmetic might be wrong, but it's been decades. It's not going to change. And the Jason Arday situation is not going to change either. What will change is this: we come to a deeper understanding of where this is all leading. And that's what I will be devoting the remainder of this talk to disentangle. Where's this all going, and where's it coming from to begin with? All right. So you got the fraud here. And I think before I go, I should tell you that there's all, why stop at Jason Arday? There's tons of academic frauds in place right now. They're probably kind of whistling to themselves. People like Steven Pinker, he's at Harvard or Yale or whatever, these guys. Right, you heard about Epstein and all his contacts at Harvard, at MIT, and all the elite schools. He was, entertaining even Professor Alan Dershowitz from Harvard Law. All those mockers, right? You know that. But there's still these guys out here. One of them is who he's amused me since I first saw him arrive on the USAID scene, because I know he's a CIA asset. He might not be an operative. He might not know he's being used, but he's definitely an asset. All this theory stuff is an intelligence operation. I think I got that point across already, right? It's an intelligence operation. It's a psychological operation. But you people are still locked on, mind control, MK Ultra, paperclip, sexy Nazis, Whitney Webb, right? You're slow learners. That stuff's old, right? Congratulations if you finally kind of catching up. But the problem is that history has been made since that time. I'm trying to point out to you it's still very much in play. It has a different face. It has a different accent. It might even have a Slovakian accent in the form of a guy named Slavoj Zizek. Here he is. And I put this mashup together for my entertainment, because when he first showed up, 30, 40, 50 years, a long time ago, right? In fact, he's cited, one of his books is cited here, Slavoj Zizek, because he's a post-structuralist thinker, a social critic, cultural theorist. Slavoj Zizek. I'm surprised he doesn't have an endowed chair at Princeton yet, or Columbia, or Harvard. He's still stuck in Estonia or Transylvania. I don't know, but he makes the circuit. It's an international circuit, star system. It is an international star system for ugly people. But when first he showed up, I said, damn, this guy's gone pretty far for a guy who speaks like Sylvester the Cat. He's that Warner Brothers character. Remember Sylvester the Cat? And remember his nemesis, Tweety Pie? I thought a putty cat. I did. That Sylvester the Cat. So I put this mashup together. I hope you like it. Here it is.
What's the matter with me? I gotta get birds off of my mind. I know. I'll play the radio. Music will get my mind off of it.
That was Bye Bye Blackbird. And now we'll play When the Red Red Robin Comes Bobbing Along.
I gotta stop myself.
I'd like to welcome Slavoj Zizek.
Hope this will work. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I also prefer the situation today where there is at least a hope that we will do, a chance that we will do more theory and so on. But I don't want to disappoint you too much, because I was nonetheless told that, like, the public is not only philosophers. So what I will try to do is simply prolong the reflections of the last days on the end of the world and so on, which means our ideological constellation today. Where are we moving? What does this mean? Well, my first association when you say the end of the world, it is culturally for me, is, does any of you know this quite terrifying song? But I think it's, if there ever was a symptom of where we are today, this is it. This mega hit Gangnam Style, which started in South Korea, then all around the world. I was told that already in the United States, it's already on the second place and so on. What interests me here is how it functions. My small son who listened to it drew my attention to it that, you know, if you play it on YouTube, you have how many hits, and then you have positive, negative opinions. That negative opinions are much larger. It's like, as my son told me, you're a big guy, if you look at Justin Bieber, you find the same, like 5-1. But nonetheless, people remain stuck onto it. They listen to it. And so I even then found a text on this hit, Gangnam Style, where they say, that's how it effectively functions. It's not that you like it, but practically everyone tells me the same. When you first hear it, you find it disgusting. But in a weird way, pleasurably disgusting. You become haunted by it. You know, it's like when something is so disgusting that fascinates you and you say, oh, it's horrible, let's take a look again at it, how horrible it is. And then slowly my son, who is 11 now, ends up listening at least 50 times per day to it. Second thing.
There! Now I won't be able to get the bird.
Oh, Mr. Pussycat, don't you like me anymore?
I think you're delicious!
I'm sorry I had to do that. I was afraid you might be weakening.
Yes, I did weaken. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Mel Blanc, who voiced many of these characters, if not all of them, most of them, of Warner Brothers. Right. They ruined it for me. Thank you very much, Warner, Jack Warner, all you guys. Okay, these are all these anarchic talented that I talked about who came out of these Eastern European shtetls and migrated to New York and then into L.A. to Los Angeles. That's part of my sensibility too. That's why I didn't take it personally when, Marilyn Young, the former president of the American Historical Association, told me my work was useless, even though I spent a whole year in Hiroshima studying the whole Japanese Holocaust. Right? Nothing personal. Right? Or Stanley Uranowitz, I sent him my dissertation to check it out and read it, and he didn't respond. But I did manage to get him to sign off on it. But he just said, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm going to start cultural studies with Andrew Ross at NYU, American study. And then it became big. And it didn't seem to hurt Andrew Ross any. He's still the director as far as I'm last I heard. But he was caught in a fraud. They were all Buffalo. They were all fooled. But nothing changed. Nothing is going to change in the case of Jason Arday. So I would like to conclude today by discussing where this comes from. All right, we know that he was at Cambridge University in the School of Education, and I should state, and I've made this point more than once before over the past several years. These schools of education are bankrupt, professionally, morally, ethically bankrupt. But if you want to go into teaching K through 12, you have to get your certification from one of these schools of education. And it's full of nothing about these characters who these post-structuralist, Marxist, feminist poseurs. They don't even understand the mumbo jumbo that they're spouting. But for your average postgraduate person who, let's say, got a degree in history and wants to have a hand at teaching, they have to go another year or so to finish teaching teacher education in America. They might come out with a master's degree. I'm not really sure, but you can't go into public school teaching unless you go through that process. So one of the first recommendations I have to that woman who runs the U.S. Department of Education, because she's the wife of one of Orange Man's, Donald Trump's big buddy, Dana White, the wrestling dude. That's his wife that runs the School of Education. I would dismantle the School of Education. I would decertify all the schools of education and start over again, because most of the fraudsters who are part of that realm are housed in the School of Education, including Jason Arday. All right, so now you have an idea where the institutional rot is emanating from. I mean, the way it's delivered and educated and promulgated amongst undergraduates who are going to go into primary education and secondary education. All right. Came out of Cambridge. Now, when you hear Cambridge, you think about the 1930s, the Cold War, the 40s and the 50s. You might be knowledgeable of the so-called Cambridge Apostles. These were the young undergraduates who came together regularly to meet in secret. Because, most of you think you know all about secret societies because you read Whitney Webb or Annie Jacobson, or you've heard it on the Joe Rogan show with Theo Vaughn, all the chuckleheads who go, oh yeah, Yale, oh, George Carlin. Yeah, George Carlin was cool, but that they can only hope that they were as incisive as George Carlin. Those people. All right, but check into the apostles, right? They're better known perhaps as part of the Cambridge spy ring during the Cold War. There was this forwriting slip. Gay Burgess or Guy Burgess. I keep making it. I say gay because they were all gay. It was a homosexual enclave. This is where the queer theory comes in, by the way. Queer theory was an after effect of all the homosexual public school activity in Britain and in Anglo-America. It's well documented. I have the literature on. Let me see. Here's a good one. It's by a guy named Michael Hone. I don't know anything about him, but this book's called Boarding School Homosexuality. Subtitled From Plato's Academy to the Princeton Rub. It talks about how male homosexuality is integral to the higher learning process in these secret clubs and societies and administration. Now it's lesbian, but it's still homosexual. And I have it marked here. I was going to read from, but I don't have time. There's a whole section on the Oxford, Cambridge, Harrow, Eton, and others, a whole section. What I'm going to do is scan that section and post it on my Patreon so you can read it at your leisure. But it gives you the whole history. It's very good. I don't know what this guy's background is, but he is of the lifestyle. He is of the homosexual lifestyle himself. He's a historian of his own homosexual subculture, right? So he has some standing, so to speak, not some erection, but some standings where it comes to intellectual substance. Okay. Right. That was just a side note because, I want you to know that I know my shinola here. I'm not just pulling the stuff out of my mind about Guy Burgess and all these other characters. But This is just something I picked up off my shelves as I was walking into my broadcast space here. Defend the Realm. Boy, this is a huge book. I think I got used. The Authorized History of MI5. So I looked in the index, and of course, Cambridge is all through this book because MI, whether it's 5 or 6, is all about Cambridge and Oxford. It's about Oxbridge, right? Oxford and Cambridge University. That's where they recruit, right? That's why I'm suspecting that makes Arday an ideally positioned to be brought in from that intelligence network that goes back decades through MI, SIS, British intelligence, and by extension, OSS, which became CIA, as you know, and the American intelligence establishment. I'm sure Jason Arday has had many, many meetings at the American embassy on cultural matters, but they're exchanging information and trying to figure out how they could infiltrate him or position him into like guest lectures or speaking tours at Yale, Harvard, Princeton, UC Berkeley, make the whole route, because they're trying to build a celebrity here. There's a star system, and all the other state universities and the lesser liberal arts colleges are going to say, okay, this is where the field is going. We got to bring this guy in. Let's support our work. There's a whole sociology of academic stardom that's repeated over, and it's a formula over and over again. Right. And there's another book that you might want to look at. It's by a guy named Michael Smith, The Real Special Relationship, the true story of how MI6 and CIA work together. All right. Right. I won't go into the deep weeds on that. That requires a whole talk in itself. But I'm saying that there is a structural connection between Jason Arday and the intelligence agencies and the Cambridge Apostles, Guy Burgess. They were homosexual spies for Stalinist Soviet. This is when Soviet Union is still around. For Stalinist Soviet Union, and Guy Burgess left. He escaped. He got away. He was probably allowed to escape, but I think he died in Moscow of cirrhosis of the liver. I can't really remember. He was a scholar himself. He was a gentleman scholar. He taught at Cambridge a little bit. Right. That was the original. Well, the original Cambridge Apostles were formed in 1820. Right. Well, they came around in the 20s and 30s. That was their undergraduate levels. By the way, Virginia Woolf, the writer, she's also held up as a feminist or proto-feminist icon, Virginia Woolf, right, with her seminal essay, A Room of One's Own. A woman needs space. Social space is a literal room, a writing room, and an independent income in order to achieve gender equality in American, in British and world society. But she was a Fabian. She was a Fabian socialist. And you're going to think, oh, okay, yeah, that's London School of Economics. I know that already. It's about the wolf and sheep culling, the stained glass. You're going to default to all that stuff, right? But let's strip out the cartoon version that you've heard from Joe Rogan show, right? She was but her point I'm making here is her brother, one of her brothers, and her father were Cambridge Apostles, the original apostles, before Burgess and his other cohort, other spies, Soviet spies. They hated the British ruling class so badly, primarily because they were ostracized for being gay, for being different. Plus, sometimes they came from middle class or lower middle class origins, so they had the kind of class resentment against the British ruling establishment. Right? It's changed differently, obviously, because they're bringing in people like Jason Arday, which is part of the rationale. We're opening up British society to the people who otherwise and previously were left outside. So that was the Cambridge Apostles in the conventional sense or understanding of it, right? But where Jason Arday comes in is that there's a cohort of people. This is something that I just learned shortly before going on air today, is that there was a other cohort that were jokingly referred to as the Cambridge Apostles. There were all people like Jason Arday. He's not the first one, but that first wave of Cambridge Apostles Junior were all South Asians. They were all Indians. They were all trained in economics at places like Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, Princeton, you name it. And they became the cutting edge of the new British Anglo-American post-war global dominant new world order. They were Indians. And that helped explain to me why there are so many Indians who are heads of CEOs in American tech companies, from Sundar Pichai all the way down. And how the hell did a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy catapult to the top there? That guy's about ready to walk into the U.S. presidency via the Ohio governorship, and his wife. And how did they match up with one of their women with J.D. Vance, Usha Vance? How does that happen? How did Sunak, Rishi Sunak, the mayor of, how the hell did he become mayor of London? He's Indian. He's South, they call him Asians there, but he's Asian. Well, it so happens his wife is the daughter of the richest man in the United Kingdom. Not the richest Indian, the richest man. All right. And it all goes back to these other Cambridge Apostles who were all South Asians. So if you want to focus on a group to watch, these are the up and comers. Right? I think there's a deliberate attempt now to put everything on Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben Shapiro and Mark Levine. Yeah, they're not nice guys and they're kind of troublemakers, but the real dark horses, so to speak, are your Asians, your South Asians. By the way, that's one of the reasons why I don't call myself an Asian anymore, or Asian American. I call myself a yellow man because I don't want anything associated with them, because their ruling class has infiltrated America and Britain. And they don't mean it no good either. And they're not Christian. They're not even Jewish. They're not, I don't even know if they're Masonic. Anyway, I won't go into that. All right, they're perfect leadership of Maitra, of the New World Order, the great teacher that's being promoted by all these New Agers. They gonna be Indian. They gonna be South Asian. They gonna be Vivek Ramaswamy and his wife, who is also Indian. All right, and it came courtesy of these intellectuals that preceded them. Right, you have to create a zone. You have to flood a zone with the brown faces. Right, we can't have no East Asians because, you got the red Chinese and you got the sneaky Japanese and you got them North Koreans, and those are all slimy, really sneaky East Asian. But the brown people, the South Asians, they're like Gunga Din. They always work for the white colonial master. Yes, Sahib. So they're trustworthy. The United States has never been in a war against India. Britain has, but not America. But America's been fighting East Asians and Southeast Asians and Filipinos since the end of the 19th century. Since, after they killed the Indians, they went over to Asia and started killing the yellow people. All right? So here is the missing piece of the puzzle for me. I haven't gotten this guy's book yet. I just found it. I'm going to order it after the show. I'm going to read it. I'm going to study it. But the piece of the puzzle fit in why the South Asian people, or what British people call Asians, are the missing piece of the puzzle in the power nexus. So if you're obsessed about the Jews, or if you're obsessed about the Vatican, or if you're obsessed about the Jesuits, or you have some sort of single factor bugaboo, bugbear in mind that you can't really get over, this is another group for you to consider, right? And it's no conspiracy. If it is, it's what HUL is called an open conspiracy. It's right on the open. It goes back to the Fabian Society. They were pro-Indian. They were pro-India and later on Pakistan independence because they knew they'd be able to control it through the use of these comprador people that we're going to see in a moment. Here we go. I'll be back in a moment. But let's see this piece first.
People I'll explain in a second, who I call the apostles of development. And what I'd like to do is tell the story through 6 people I'll explain in a second, who I call the apostles of development. All 6 were born subjects in British South Asia. All enrolled in the mid-1950s in Cambridge's famed economics tripos. They started in 1953, 1954. And there are many, many other ways to tell this story, but this is the story that I choose to tell here. They were remarkably accomplished in a variety of different pursuits. I'll kind of go through them quickly in a minute. And I would say that they covered as much of the development enterprise in terms of theory, practice, their ideas, as any 6 individuals could, even though they are, of course, all South Asian. I call them the apostles of development, which is a kind of Cambridge in-joke. There's an organization in Cambridge, a student club called the Conversazione Society. It only has 12 members, and so someone, I think in the 19th century, nicknamed them the Apostles. And 2 of the 6, actually, 2 of these 6 were members of the Conversazione Society. But I would say that they, in spite of the fact they represented a wide range of backgrounds, politics, inclinations, and personalities, that their Cambridge experience, they were all shaped by being at Cambridge. Their careers, I think, were made by it. They all came to Cambridge from different places. 5 of the 6 had university education in South Asia before coming to Cambridge. In fact, 2 of them had not just bachelor's but master's degrees in economics from South Asia, and then started from scratch in the economics tripos as an undergraduate degree. They remained friends, rivals, frenemies for much, if not all, of their lives. All of them were born in the mid-1930s, 4 in northern India, affected by the bloody partition of 1947. In fact, one of them, Manmohan Singh's daughter, has a memoir of her parents, or a biography of her parents, in which he says, to my parents, 1947 was not the year of Indian independence, it was the year of partition.
That piece, you can find it on your own. I don't need to link it. Just look up this person's name and you can see the entire lecture. And I think most of you would be interested beyond just a certain snapshot of who these people are. It's a cohort. It's a group. And Jason Arday was going to, because the South Asian hegemony has already, they're all in place. All those assets have been groomed over the past several decades. They've been put in Silicon Valley. They've been government. You got Vijay Ramaswamy. You got them in British government. You got them all through finance. You have them in the corporations, right? So they have to consolidate. The New World Order, the Anglo-American Alliance, has to bring in people from Africa, south of the Sahara, Black Africa, and the Caribbean, part of the Black diaspora. Jason Arday is part of that cohort they're trying to bring as Apostles Act 3. You understand? But then he got busted. The whole story got blown because they thought you and me were asleep at the wheel instead of studying cultural forensics. They thought they were going to slip him right in, so they had to off him. He was offed. But they ain't going to go away. But we're going to be right on time. By the way, I was addressing this topic before it really broke. I was on the Sean Atwood show a couple weeks ago and asked him at the beginning of the program, if he knew about Jason Arday, because I wanted to know. He's in Britain. I think he's in London. said, how's this playing out in your part of the world? Because it happened at Cambridge, but he didn't know anything about it. So I couldn't really get into it because he was unfamiliar with the circumstance. It was the hottest story at the moment. It was just breaking. But I knew it was going to be a big story. I did not know that it was going to end in his death, but it doesn't surprise me. You've heard about the Clinton death count, haven't you? You know that these people play for keeps. You know about Jeffrey Epstein. You know that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. Okay, how many more lessons do we need? Study cultural forensics, be on top, anticipate, don't react. And then you will become possibly an Aikido master. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's an hour and a half. We're lucky to have gotten done so quickly. Anyway, peace out, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Watch this over again. Sit down with other people. Share it. I will, maybe not today. I'm hungry. I got to eat. I'll scan that material about Cambridge, Oxford, homosexual spy networks. It's a really good segment. And I'll put that on my Patreon. I'd like to share it with you because it's a collective effort that we're involved with right here. And I might have been locked out of UC Davis. I might have been fired from UC Davis. I might have had the locks changed on me to my office to UC Davis. But thanks to the wonders of TubeView, ironically, I can reach thousands of people more. And I'm going to do it as long as I can. Thank you very much. Peace out. See you next Sunday, God willing.